I never thought I'd be the kind of person to go through someone's phone, but there I was, trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief, clutching my husband's old iPhone in my hand. We just come back from what was supposed to be our perfect honeymoon. Every moment glittered like a dream. But that dream fractured the moment I saw the messages. It started with a gut feeling, a nagging suspicion that refused to die. I'd caught him acting weird before, getting tense when my phone buzzed or when I glanced over his shoulder. But I brushed it off, convincing myself I was paranoid. Still, something about the way he hurried to hide his screen that night made my skin crawl. I was lying in bed trying to sleep when I noticed his phone lit up on the nightstand, screen facing down. My heart pounded. I reached over and picked it up, pretending to check the time. The screen was locked, of course. But I remembered the password, our wedding date. I hesitated, then entered it. The messages I saw made my stomach drop. There were texts between him and someone I'd only vaguely heard of, the best man, Jake. I saw the words that cut like a knife. Can't wait to see you tonight, and last night was incredible. They'd been texting all through the evening, even during the reception. I felt my hands trembling as I scrolled further. There were photos, him and Jake, arms around each other, smirks on their faces. One blurry shot showed them in a hotel room with a bed behind them. I read the last message that sealed it. Meet me now. I need to see you. The date was the night of the honeymoon, right after our wedding. My mouth went dry. I didn't need any more proof. My pulse was hammering in my ears. My palms felt slick with sweat. How could I have missed the signs? The late nights, the strange calls, the little lies I shrugged off. All of it suddenly made sense. I closed his phone, my fingers trembling, but the image of those messages burned into my mind. I sat there for a long minute, trying to breathe through the whirlwind of shock. My mind raced. I wanted to confront him right then and there, but I knew better. This isn't something you surprise someone with. I needed to think, to plan. That night I stayed silent, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe I had trusted him. We'd been together for years, married for just a few months, and I'd thought we were solid. Turns out the person I thought I knew was a stranger hiding behind a mask. The worst part, I'd seen the proof in black and white. The next morning I woke up with a knot twisting in my stomach. I didn't know how to face him. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw everything at him. Another part just wanted to disappear. I kept circling the room, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When he finally came out of the bathroom, I saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he played it cool. "Hey honey, sleep okay?" he asked, voice too smooth, too casual. I stared at him for a second, my throat tight. "Who were you texting last night?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He froze, then quickly reached for his phone. I saw his hand tremble. "Just some friends," he mumbled. "No." I snapped. "It's not just friends. I saw the messages. You cheated on me during our honeymoon." He looked stunned, then his face hardened. "You're overreacting." I clenched my fists. "I saw the proof. I know everything." His eyes flicked away. "It doesn't mean anything." I felt my jaw tighten. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't stay silent, not anymore. That's when the idea started to simmer, something simple yet sharp. I decided I'd find a way to make him regret every single lie and betrayal. I didn't want just a breakup. I wanted him to feel the way I did, betrayed, humiliated, and powerless. I needed a plan. I would destroy his trust, his reputation, whatever it took. But first I had to gather more. I needed proof, allies, a way to hit him where it hurt most. As I sat there, staring at the morning sun filtering through the curtains, I knew things wouldn't go back to normal. Not anymore. I was done being the victim. I would fight back, and I'd start by turning his own secrets against him. And that's where I'm starting from. I don't have all the pieces yet. But I know one thing for sure. He'd better get ready, because I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. The next few days were a blur of cold calculation and mounting fury. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, kept replaying that moment when I saw his messages on his phone. My skin still prickled at the memory, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, calm, confident, like he thought he could get away with it. I started digging. I couldn't trust him anymore, not even with the simplest things. I checked his emails, his social media accounts, anything that might give me an edge. But I knew I needed something more concrete, something that would blow this wide open and make him regret what he'd done. One evening, I decided to confront him again. I called him into the living room, my voice steady but cold. "We need to talk," I said. "Really talk." He looked at me, trying to act normal. "About what?" "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "I saw the messages, the photos, the hotel, the nights you spent sneaking around during our honeymoon." He swallowed hard. "You're overthinking." "It's nothing." "No," I said, voice sharper. "It's everything. I want the truth now, or I swear I'll find it myself." He hesitated, then his shoulders sagged. "Look, I didn't mean for it to happen. It was stupid, a mistake. It meant nothing." "It meant nothing," I echoed, incredulous. "That makes it better." He looked away, silent. That silence, that guilty stare, was all I needed. I knew I had to dig deeper. I remembered Jake's name from the messages and decided I'd find out everything I could about him. I hit the internet, searching for Jake, trying to find any way to use him against him. It was slow at first, but then I struck gold. An Instagram account with recent photos, a location tag from a hotel right where I knew they'd met. I downloaded everything I could find, storing it in a hidden folder on my laptop. What I really needed was leverage, something that would shake him to his core. I wanted him to realize that I wasn't going to be some naive wife pushed aside and dismissed. I wanted to make him pay. The next step was to get even closer. To Jake, I started lurking on social media, watching his posts, tracking who he talked to, figuring out his routines. It was sick, I admit, but I needed every scrap of info. I even created a fake account just to get closer, to see if I could find out more about his plans, his weaknesses. All the while, my mind kept circling back to his words, his lies. I had to prepare for the next move. I couldn't just confront him with a few photos and expect him to fold. No, I needed to catch him off guard, make him realize how badly he'd screwed up. One night, I overheard him talking on the phone in the living room. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught snippets, words like cover and escape plan. My stomach clenched. I wasn't sure what he was planning, but it was enough to confirm I was right. He was trying to hide something, and I was determined to uncover it. That's when I decided I'd turn the tables. I'd become the one in control, the one holding the evidence. I knew I had to act carefully, covertly, but I also knew I couldn't let this slide anymore. I'd come too far to back down now. My plan was simple in theory: gather enough proof to confront him publicly, expose him, and make sure he felt how much he'd betrayed me. But I also wanted to see how far I could push him, see if I could make him sweat, break his composure. The biggest obstacle was trust. I didn't trust him anymore. Didn't trust that he wouldn't just lie his way out of it. So I kept collecting, analyzing, waiting for the perfect moment. Every day that passed, I felt my resolve harden. I was done being naive. I was done being the victim. And I knew I wasn't alone in this. I had to be careful, yes, but I also had to stay resolute. Because once I had enough evidence, I was going to confront him, not just with words, but with everything I'd amassed. And he'd have no choice but to face the consequences. I looked around my apartment, feeling the weight of all this chaos pressing down on me. I was ready. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was going to take back control. No matter what it took. He thought he could get away with it. He thought I'd never find out. But I was about to make sure he learned just how wrong he was. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that I'd underestimated just how deep his deception went. Every new piece of evidence felt like a punch to the gut, but I also started feeling a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't just gathering dirt. I was constructing a weapon. My mind kept spinning, plotting how I'd hit him where it hurt, how to make him regret every lie, every betrayal. I'd spent hours watching Jake's online profiles, screenshotting every message, every emoji, every location tag. I'd even managed to hack into his email account, not proud of that, but desperation makes you do things. My goal was not just to catch him, but to have enough damning proof to confront him confidently. One night, I finally had it. I sat in front of my laptop, heart pounding like a drum, and looked at the collection of evidence I'd amassed. Photos, messages, emails, everything showed a pattern of deception. It was all there. I felt a strange mix of power and nausea. Power because I was finally in control, and nausea because I knew I was about to destroy someone I once loved. The plan was simple but cruelly effective. I'd confront him with everything, but I'd do it in a way that left him no room to deny. I'd make him see that I knew the truth, that I had the evidence, and that I was done playing nice. I prepared a file on my laptop, an anonymous package of his secrets. I was going to send it directly to his phone, just enough to make him understand that I wasn't bluffing. I wanted him to feel the weight of betrayal crashing down on him. That night I watched him sleep for a moment, my stomach twisting. I remembered the good times, the quiet mornings, the laughs, the plans for the future. It all felt like a distant memory now. I clenched my fists. This was no longer about regret or heartbreak. It was about justice, or at least my version of it. I slipped my thumb on the screen, ready to send the file, then hesitated. Part of me wanted to see his face when he realized I'd outsmarted him. I wanted him to understand I was serious. I paused for a second, then pressed send. The moment I hit send, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I knew the game was on. I sat back, waiting, feeling a strange calm settle over me. Whatever came next, I was ready for it. The next morning, I woke up to a string of texts from him, initially frantic, then angry, then defensive. I ignored them at first, letting the tension build. Then I finally responded with one line: "We need to talk." I knew I'd pushed him into a corner now. There was no escape. He finally called me that afternoon, voice trembling. "What the hell did you do?" I kept my tone even. "I found out about Jake. I found everything. You thought you could hide it, but I'm not blind anymore." "You don't understand," he stammered. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "Too late," I said. "You lost my trust the day you decided to cheat on me, but I'm not done. I want the truth, and I want it now." His silence was deafening. I could feel the silence crackle through the phone. Then he finally admitted it was about revenge. "I felt trapped. I thought you didn't love me anymore." That confession made my stomach churn. I didn't care about his excuse. All I cared about was making him realize that I knew everything, that he had no place left to hide. I told him I'd be waiting for him that evening, and I was going to lay everything out on the table. I wasn't planning on giving him any room to wiggle. I had prepared the evidence to spill all at once, ensuring he'd see just how badly he'd screwed up. As I hung up, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. I was finally taking control. I didn't know exactly how he'd react when confronted with the truth, but I knew he wouldn't be able to deny it anymore. That night, I sat on the couch, heart pounding again, clutching a USB drive with all the files. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, my fingers trembling as I prepared for the showdown. The moment was coming. I wasn't going to hold back anymore. He walked in the door around 8 p.m., looking tired, worn out. I fixed him with a cold stare. "Sit," I commanded. "We need to talk." He hesitated, then slowly sat down. "I know what you found," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry I messed up." I pulled out the USB and placed it on the table between us. "This," I said, voice steady, "is everything I've uncovered, all the proof you tried to hide. It's going to stay here, and I want you to understand something." He looked at the drive, then back at me, eyes wide. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand how much you've hurt me," I said, "and I want you to know that I'm done playing the fool." His face, for once, was devoid of that cocky bravado. It was vulnerable, defeated. I felt a wave of satisfaction, but also a cold, hard resolve. I was done giving chances. He'd made his choice, and now it was time for mine. Without another word, I stood up, grabbed the keys, and handed them to him. "Here, your apartment key," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're leaving tomorrow. Don't come back." He stared at me, stunned. "You're serious?" "Yes," I replied, "I am." I watched as he took the keys, understanding this was the end, a clean break. No more lies, no more betrayal, just a quiet, decisive step away from someone I once trusted with everything. And as I turned to leave, I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. I was finally free from the chaos, and I was going to rebuild my life, stronger, wiser. The takeaway: trust is fragile, and sometimes the only way to move on is to cut out what's rotten at the root. The apartment felt colder the moment I handed him the keys and told him to leave. It was strange, almost surreal, like I'd stepped outside of myself and watched everything happen from a distance. My hands were still trembling, but my mind was clear. This was the end of a chapter I never wanted to open, but I knew I had no choice. He left that night, backpack in hand, stumbling out with a defeated look I'd never seen before. The door shut behind him with a dull thud that echoed louder than I expected. Silence settled in, thick and suffocating. I stood there staring at the empty doorway, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I sat on the couch, staring at the USB drive still resting on the table. I didn't want to look at it right away, but I knew it was the key to moving forward. I needed to see everything I'd collected, proof that he'd betrayed me in ways I'd never imagined. I reached for the drive, my fingers hesitant, then plugged it into my laptop. The files loaded quickly and I saw the mountain of evidence I'd compiled, screenshots, messages, photos. It was all there, laid bare. I scrolled through the messages from Jake, the hotel receipts, even some voice recordings I'd secretly made. Every piece confirmed what I already knew. This was more than a fling, it was a full-blown betrayal. As I listened to the recordings, I felt a surge of anger. His voice sounded strained, guilt, shame, maybe even fear. I'd seen him planning to run, to hide, but I was no longer interested in hiding. I wanted him to see what he'd caused. I wanted him to realize that I had all the power now. I drafted a message, attaching the evidence, and sent it to him with a simple note. "This is what I found, I'm done." No explanation, no plea, just cold, factual. I watched the delivery status update, waiting for him to open it. Meanwhile, I started blocking him everywhere: social media, email, phone. I didn't want to hear his excuses, his apologies, or his guilt. I needed space to breathe, to heal, and to reclaim what was mine. That's when I realized how much I'd been holding on to: hope, love, trust, and how much of it was just illusions. The days that followed were a whirlwind. I felt like I was walking through mud, constantly questioning whether I'd done the right thing. But every time I doubted myself, I remembered the betrayal, the lies, the secret nights, all the moments I'd ignored or brushed off. I told myself that staying was no longer an option. I started focusing on myself, going out more, reconnecting with friends who supported me, even doing things that made me feel alive again. I kept replaying that night I found the messages, how it had shattered everything I believed about him. It was a wound, but it was also a lesson. Trust is earned, not given blindly. One evening I was at a bar with a friend, sipping my drink and trying to shake off the residual numbness. I caught his eyes across the room, him, looking lost, like he'd finally realized what he'd lost. It stung a little, but I also felt a strange sense of closure. That's when I decided I'd confront him one last time, just to say what I needed to say. Not to rekindle, not to get answers, but to make sure he knew I was moving on without him. The next morning I texted him, "It's over. I've moved on. Don't try to contact me again." I hit send and felt the weight lift off my shoulders. It was final. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my life piece by piece. I got a new job, started therapy, and finally allowed myself to breathe. It wasn't easy, but every day I felt stronger, more in control. I learned that the only way to heal was to accept what happened, face the pain, and decide not to let it define me. Looking back, I see how far I've come. I was naive, trusting blindly, but I also learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself again. You have to be willing to walk away from what's broken, even if it hurts. So my advice: trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. Gather your strength, your evidence, and don't be afraid to cut ties if you have to. Because at the end of the day, the only person truly responsible for your happiness is you. And nobody deserves to be betrayed and kept in the dark. If you're going through this, remember, you are stronger than the pain. You can rebuild, you can heal, and you can find happiness again, even if it feels impossible right now. Just take the first step. The weeks after I cut him loose felt like walking through fog, uncertain, heavy, and a little numb. I knew I'd made the right decision, but that doesn't mean the pain didn't linger. Every day was a struggle to keep from spiraling back into the darkness of doubt and regret. Still, I clung to the fact that I was finally reclaiming myself, piece by piece. One thing I realized early on was that revenge, while tempting, wasn't the point anymore. Not really. I'd gone through enough betrayal to know that dwelling on it only kept me tethered to what had happened. Instead, I focused on what I could control: my healing, my happiness, and creating boundaries that meant nobody could ever do this to me again. I started working on myself more intentionally. I rejoined my favorite gym class, even though I'd been too broken to care before. I reached out to friends I'd neglected during the chaos, and some of them even surprised me with how supportive they were. I'd always been the kind of person who kept a brave face, but now I allowed myself to feel everything: the anger, the sadness, the relief. One evening, I was sitting in a cozy cafe, sipping coffee and scrolling through old photos. I didn't recognize the woman I saw in some of the pictures, smiling, confident, finally free. I thought about the life I'd been living before all this chaos, and I made a quiet promise to myself: I'd never let someone's betrayal define who I am. That's when I decided to take back some of the power I'd given away. I'd been hiding from the truth for too long. I finally sat down and wrote a letter, not to him but to myself. It was a reminder of everything I'd survived, everything I'd learned, and everything I deserved. I kept it simple but honest. I am stronger than this pain. I am worthy of love and respect. I will not let betrayal break me. I am rebuilding, and I will come out better on the other side. Reading that every morning became my new ritual. It was my armor, my shield against the lingering doubts. I'd survived a storm, and I was still standing. One day, I found myself at a bookstore, browsing through self-help shelves. I picked out a few books about trust, healing, and moving on. When I paid, I noticed a man in line behind me, kind eyes, warm smile. We struck up a conversation about life, about heartbreak, about finding strength again. We ended up exchanging numbers, something I'd never expected at a time like this. That was the moment I realized I was finally ready to start trusting again, not blindly, but gradually. To let someone in carefully. It was terrifying but also freeing. It proved that I could survive the worst and still find something good on the other side. Looking back, I see how much I've grown. The pain was a catalyst, forced me to face my trauma, my boundaries, and most importantly, my worth. I learned that revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclaiming your power and refusing to let betrayal define you. If you're reading this and feeling broken, I want you to know that you're not alone. You can heal, you can forgive, and you can move forward. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday soon. Just take one step, however small, and keep going. Because the journey to reclaiming yourself starts with a single brave move. Remember, you are worthy of a love that's honest, a trust that's earned, and happiness that's real. Don't let their betrayal keep you bound. Your future is waiting, and it's brighter than you think. The final piece of this puzzle came when I finally took decisive action. I realized I'd been through enough. No more waiting, no more second guessing. I gathered all the evidence I'd accumulated, the photos, messages, recordings, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. One afternoon, I went to the lawyer's office. I sat across from her, feeling a strange mixture of cold resolve and relief. I handed her a folder with everything I had: proof of the affair, evidence of the betrayal, everything that could be used to make a clean break. I told her I wanted to finalize the divorce, quickly and without any fuss. I didn't want to drag this out. I just wanted it over so I could finally move on. As I watched her prepare the paperwork, I took a deep breath and let the weight of the past fall away. For all the pain, the heartbreak, and the betrayal, I was finally free. I'd taken control of my life again, and I was choosing happiness over misery. Walking out of the lawyer's office, I couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of strength. I knew it wouldn't erase what had happened, but it marked the beginning of my new chapter. I was no longer a victim of his lies. I was a survivor, and I was ready to rebuild. That evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It felt like the world was finally in balance again. I thought about everything I'd learned. Trust is fragile, and the only person responsible for my happiness is me. I'd made mistakes, sure, but I'd also learned how to stand up and fight for myself. Looking back, I can honestly say that surviving this mess has made me stronger. I've learned to listen to my instincts, to set boundaries, and most importantly, to love myself enough not to accept anything less than honesty and respect. So, to everyone out there dealing with betrayal and heartbreak, know that your pain isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new, better chapter. You have the power to walk away, to heal, and to find happiness again. It's not easy and it's not quick, but it's worth it. Today, I handed over the keys to my old life and stepped into the future with confidence. I'm finally free, and that freedom, soft, bright, and real, is the best revenge I could ever have hoped for.